When we were kids, they told us one thing. Gotta catch 'em all. Or something like that. It sounded innocent. A slogan, a game, a cartoon, a playground obsession wrapped in bright, colorful, cute monsters in plastic packaging. What could go wrong, right? But decades later, the question starts to feel a little less like a joke. What exactly were we catching? The creatures, the cards, the memories, or were we the ones being caught? Because Pokemon is not just like a game anymore, it's a global entertainment machine, right? Like a video game empire, a trading card economy, a TV franchise, a merchandise pipeline, a mobile data platform, and a nostalgia engine powerful enough to reach inside of adults and pull out the child who once begged for a booster pack in the checkout line. A darker question is this, though. Did Pokemon simply entertain an entire generation, or did it train one? Pokemon seemed to arrive at like the perfect moment, right? The late 90s, Game Boys in backpacks, Saturday morning cartoons, link cables, lunch tables, fast food toys, birthday parties, right? Binder pages filled with holographic cards that felt a little bit more like treasure than the cardboard they really were. So for children, it's everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And me personally, I remember I had bunch of the games and cards and stuff, but I really didn't know why. Pokemon was not just one product. That was the genius, honestly. It was a loop. You watched the cartoon, which made you want the game, which you played the game, which made you want the cards, and then you bought the cards, which made you want the toys, and you carried the toys, which made you talk about the show, and every conversation sent you back into this loop, right? So the franchise didn't need to choose between media, merchandise, social status. It became all three. And at the center of this, it was a simple psychological hook that we all kind of suffer from: collecting things. Not winning, not finishing, not even necessarily playing, but actually collecting. The promise was never beat the game, the promise was catch them all. A really simple task, but designed to be emotionally satisfying, socially contagious, and almost impossible to fully complete, even inside the Nintendo game, I remember. So for a child, that actually really matters. Children are drawn to categories, right? Animals, monsters, teams, colors, types. Fire beats grass, water beats fire. Evolution means growth. Rarity means value. Pokemon took the natural childlike desire to sort the world and turn it into a product system. Every creature had a name, every name had a shape, every shape has a number, and every number had a place in the collection. And whether that be this generation, the next generation, the ghost type, the fire, whatever, their abilities, you name it, it gave children a universe that felt learnable, which is something we can't really say about the universe today. Everything around us is just kind of abounding now, especially with AI and everything else coming into the mix. So just imagine this is something, it gave them something to cling on to. And once a child learns a universe, they don't just consume it, they tend to live inside it. So naturally, I went looking for scientific evidence to back these claims, and researchers actually found something strange. Years later, adults who played Pokemon heavily as children showed specific brain responses to Pokemon characters and categories. Not just casual recognition, not just nostalgia, but their brains had become unusually efficient at identifying these particular cartoon creatures.
Who's that Pokemon?
It's Pikachu!
It's Clefairy!
That does not mean Pokemon brainwashed anyone necessarily, but it does suggest something powerful, that repeat childhood exposure can carve deep recognition pathways into young minds. Minds that remember what it is trained to see. Names, types, abilities. Hundreds of monsters became 100 mental files, and then 200 and 500 and 1,000, and ask the uncomfortable question: if media companies can create characters so memorable that an entire generation carries them into adulthood at the level of instant visual recognition, what else can be attached to that recognition? A product? Purchases? A brand? A feeling? Because nostalgia's not just a memory. Nostalgia is memory with a price tag. The card game itself was supposed to be about playing, right? I mean, you want to get your little guys together, see which one is the best, but to be honest, how many kids actually understood the full rules? How many bought packs to build competitive decks? How many were chasing the shine, right? Holographic Charizard, the rare pull. I remember back in the day, my friends were all about Charizard, and even still today you see that hype live on. The one sealed pack that might change everything. Trading cards introduce children to a strange economy before they even really understand money. Scarcity, speculation, condition, status, counterfeits, market value, fear of missing out, FOMO. We've all heard that now. The booster pack is not sold like a normal toy. It's sold like a mystery, a gotcha. You're not buying the card, you're buying the chance, and the chance is powerful. It creates stories, it creates disappointment, obsession, and it can create that feeling that the next pack might finally be the one. And it's very similar to what we see in gambling. This is not a side effect of the model, that it just is the model. Today's Pokemon cards are no longer just childhood collectibles. They're graded assets, investment pieces, speculative inventory, and reseller bait, if I'm being straightforward with you in my own opinion. Stores sell out, scalpers swarm new releases, counterfeits flood markets, and parents compete with grown adults for product originally marketed to children. And somehow the machine keeps printing more cards, more sets, more chase cards, more anniversary editions, more sealed boxes treated like stock options. At what point does children's card game become like a soft introduction into gambling, psychology, and trading? At what point does collecting become conditioning? And if the product is designed around scarcity, randomness, and emotional attachment, who is really playing who? The most valuable Pokemon customer may not be the child discovering Pikachu for the first time. It may be the adult who remembers discovering Pikachu for the first time. That is where the nostalgia actually becomes a business weapon. Right? A child wants something because it's new. An adult wants something because it feels old. And Pokemon has mastered both. To be completely frank, the franchise does not need to reinvent itself completely. It only needs to resurface at the right moments. Anniversaries, re-releases, remakes, classic starters, original 151 references, vintage card designs, old characters returning in new packaging. Every generation gets its own Pokemon, but the first generation gets sold its childhood back. That is the darker genius of the whole thing. A brand grew up with us, but it never let us grow out of it. It followed us from playground to workplace, from Game Boy cartridges to smartphones, from binders under the bed to graded slabs in glass cases, from Happy Meals to resale markets. What began as childhood entertainment became adult identity. And identity is much harder to quit than a game. So Pokemon is not alone in this. I mean, McDonald's and Disney help perfect the same ritual. Take a children's meal, add a limited toy, tie it to a movie, a character, a franchise, a moment. Make the product cheap enough for parents, exciting enough for kids, and collectible enough to drive repeat visits. The food became secondary. The toy became the hook. Pokemon fit perfectly into that machine because Pokemon was already built on collecting. A Happy Meal with a Pokemon card is not just lunch, it is a booster pack with fries. And that fusion really matters because it combines appetite, habit, branding, and scarcity into a single childhood core memory. You do not just remember the toy, you remember the box, the smell, the restaurant, the car ride, the parent saying yes, the feeling of really opening it for the first time. And that is how brands become emotional architecture. They don't just advertise to children, they become part of childhood itself. And when a company becomes part of childhood, it may not need to advertise as aggressively later on. The memory does all the work. Pokemon's partnership with Nintendo gave it something even more powerful than television. It gave it interactivity. A cartoon can show you the world, a game lets you enter it. And once you enter, the loop becomes personal. You choose a starter, you name your character, you train the team. You beat the rival, you trade with your friends, and you transfer forward. You build continuity, and that continuity is important because every new game is not just a product, it's a new chapter in a life you've already invested in. Pokemon does not reset, it kind of accumulates. More creatures, more regions, more forms, more mechanics, more memories for you to build on. The product becomes a timeline, and the consumer becomes the archive. So when the new game launches, the question is not simply, is the game good? The question becomes, do I still belong to this world? That is a much deeper kind of brand loyalty that is not just marketing. It's an emotional infrastructure that can be really hard to escape if you don't even know you're in it. And then came Pokemon Go. Niantic's success. Suddenly, catching Pokemon was no longer something you just did on a Nintendo screen or with little cardboard slabs. It was something you did in the real world. Parks, churches, memorials, businesses, sidewalks, landmarks, and neighborhoods. I mean, everywhere. Millions of people walking through physical space, guided by invisible digital incentives. The pitch was magical. Pokemon in the real world, but the infrastructure was something else entirely, and many people don't really realize. It's data. Location data, movement patterns, points of interest, camera scans, augmented reality mapping, real-world behavioral trials. And to be clear, location-based apps collect location data. That's not unique to Pokemon Go, but Pokemon Go made the collection feel like play. It turned walking into gameplay, landmarks into resources, and public space into a game board. It turned the player into both customer and sensor. And that raises uncomfortable questions, like when a game can move crowds, what else can it move? Especially if it's exploring places you didn't have information on previously. You're sort of using that person as an anchor to get information you wouldn't have had otherwise, or maybe would have had to pay someone for. So when a company can identify where you gather, for how long they stay, or what routes they take, what is that information actually worth? When augmented reality companies build maps not just for humans but for machines, robots, glasses, spatial awareness, where does the game end? Where does your information that you provided catching a Charizard or a Charmander really help other companies without benefiting you at all? Pokemon Go was marketed as a way to explore the world. But it may have also helped the world become more machine readable at your expense. Mapping the world is powerful, and millions of players were once sent outside to help make that map better. Not because they were forced, but because they wanted to catch Pokemon. So, this is where it gets a bit murky, I can't lie, but Niantic's history connects back through Google mapping technology and even earlier geospatial companies that definitely attracted government-linked interest and investment. It doesn't prove Pokemon Go was some sort of government psyop or anything, but the harder question is more realistic. What happens when entertainment platforms generate data that governments, corporations, advertisers, defense-adjacent industries all find valuable? What happens when the same tools that guide a child to a cartoon monster can guide machines through the real streets? What happens when playful behavior creates strategic infrastructure? The modern world does not always need a conspiracy. Sometimes it only needs incentives. Companies want engagement, advertisers want behavior, platforms want data, governments want maps, investors, they want to scale, and consumers want fun. The question is not whether Pokemon secretly designed by a shadow government or something, it's really, did a children's franchise become so profitable, so data rich, and so culturally embedded that powerful institutions would inevitably find it and use it against us? Did Pokemon brainwash us? Maybe not in an obvious way. Maybe no one sat in a boardroom and said, let's capture an entire generation. No. Maybe it was simpler than that. They built a world children loved, and then they built products around that love, and they built scarcity around those products. Then they attached to markets with that scarcity and built nostalgia around those memories that you have. They built apps around that nostalgia, and they built data systems around those apps. That's the uncomfortable part. Pokemon did not need our own minds. It only needed to occupy permanent room inside them. And once a brand lives in your childhood, it never has to knock again. It already has the key. Maybe it's just a brilliant game, a beautiful world, and one of the most successful entertainment franchises ever created. Maybe the cards are just cards. Maybe the games are just games, and maybe the nostalgia is just nostalgia. But if a company can teach children to memorize hundreds of branded creatures, and if it can turn cardboard into a speculative economy, if it can fuse toys with food and games with identity and location tracking with play, if it can follow a generation from childhood to adulthood and then sell them the same emotional trigger over and over again, then we have to ask, where does the entertainment end? Where does the conditioning begin? And when we say gotta catch 'em all, are we still talking about Pokemon? Or are we talking about us? Let me know your comments down below. I want to hear what you guys think about this.